It's Kermit Washington. I just want to do a summary of my book, 2020, The Kermit Washington Story. Basically, I was born in 1951 in Washington, D.C. to my mother, Barbara Washington, and my father, Alexander Washington. My brother was a year and a half older than me. That was Eric Washington. And growing up in Washington, D.C. was pretty rough, and I'm going to tell you the story about it. My mother graduated from college summa cum laude #1 in her class, and back then she went to a D.C. teachers college. They didn't allow blacks to go to regular colleges at that time. But she graduated with perfect grades. So they said she had an IQ of like 125, but she was very brilliant. My father tried to go to Penn State. He really didn't get in. But she became paranoid schizophrenic after I think I was 1 or 2 years old. And very strange behavior, and it caused a lot of problems in the family. I remember my brother and I, we were like 2 or 3. She would take us down into the basement. It would be dark, and she'd be talking to people down there. I remember his name, Mr. Erickson, and it's from the dolphin people, the whale people. And we didn't know what was going on. When you're little, she kept saying, he's going to come and get us and take us away, and we'll never have to worry about anything in our lives. So, well, because of my mother's sickness, my mother told my uncle that my father was abusing her. And so my uncle, who was a fireman, came over and a big fight broke out. And when the fight broke out, my poor father was a little guy, about 5'10", 135 pounds, and my uncle, was being a very muscular fireman, was beating the crap out of my father, and my grandmother grabbed a hammer and hit my uncle in the head with it. And all I remember is blood everywhere. And that's the last time I ever saw my mother and my father together. And from that point on, my brother and we moved in with my grandmother and my grandfather, and on Maryland Avenue in Washington, D.C. for maybe about a month or so. And then my father bought a house in D.C. On 237 Farragut Street. But all of a sudden, we ended up with a great-grandmother named Florence. And she was born in 1886. She couldn't read or write, but she was taking care of 2 little boys. I think we were 4 or 5 years old or whatever. And she ruled with an iron fist, so you better behave. We were always well behaved, but we really didn't have any nice clothes or anything else like that when we would go to school. And I always remember we have 2 shirts and 2 pairs of pants. And the kids at school would make fun of us all the time, basically. We know what you're going to wear tomorrow. So my brother and I would switch clothes. We only had to, we tried to switch clothes a lot of times, and so people wouldn't harass us. But back then, you talk about being bullied. I mean, we were bullied every day there. I mean, that's what happens in school. And not being able to do our schoolwork because we had nobody to work with us at home. But we would bring home D's and F's, and we'd tell our grandmothers their F's for fantastic, D's for dynamite, and she would just put an X, and we would take it back to school and just laugh. But it wasn't fun growing up because we didn't have anything. And my father, I don't know where he was, to be honest with you. My mother was put into an institution, but they let her out. And the day they let her out, she came to visit us, me and my brother, in D.C. when my great-grandmother was taking care of us. So she comes to us and said, well, Chris and Kermit, I'm going to take you guys to school. I'm going to walk you to school. So my great-grandmother said, okay, yeah, they can take her to school. You can take them to school. She marched us to the train station. We got on the train, and we went to Chicago. So she was just kidnapping us away from where we were. I remember we ran out of money all the time, and she didn't have any money and nothing to eat. So we stayed in the Salvation Army. My mother didn't like the Salvation Army because in the mornings you had to pray and hold hands and do different prayers to eat. And I was hungry. I was praying to do anything. I jumped up and down. But she didn't like it, so she said, we're leaving. So we got up and we just left the Salvation Army. I said, Mom, we can eat here. But you know what? If my mother said get up and leave, we got up and leave. She said we don't have any food. You don't argue. You just get up and just say that's what's going to happen. So after a couple of days when we had nothing to eat for so many days, she called my father and just wanted my father to send money to Chicago. He sent 2 plane tickets back for us. So we had 2 little boys. We were dirty. We only had we only wore what we had on for probably weeks. And we got on the plane and we headed back to D.C. And my father picked us up, and we didn't see our mother probably for 5 years after that. So my brother was very good in school. All of a sudden, because he took after my mother, very, very smart young man. And for me, no, I had an attention problem. I didn't like school. And when they took me back, they wanted to put me back into the 1st grade. because they said I'd missed so much school. But my father fought with them, and so they kept me into the second grade. They could have kept me in the second grade for 10 years because I wasn't doing anything till later on. But growing up, my father remarried, and all of a sudden we moved in with him. The situation with my stepmother was 10 times worse with my great-grandmother. She hated us. She let us know she didn't like us. And for the next like 6 or 7 years, it's a living hell. But that was made my brother and I become very tough and to be able to make pro basketball and pro football.